It was 7:30 on a cold Thursday evening, the kind of evening where the streetlights hummed louder than the traffic. Inside a small, tidy apartment in a quiet suburb of Toronto, a woman named Elena Ward was hiding. The cold of the Canadian winter seemed to seep right through the walls, but inside that apartment, the air was thick and hot with fear. "Hey there and welcome back. I'm so happy you're here. Grab that blanket, maybe pour yourself a hot drink and get really comfortable because today we're settling in for a story you won't forget. Before we dive any deeper though, let me know how you're doing. Drop a quick comment and tell me what part of the world you're watching from today. And if you want to stay with us through all the twists and turns ahead, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a moment. Alright, let's get back to it. Elena was a single mom, 35 years old, and she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders like a heavy winter coat she couldn't take off. She had kind eyes, the color of warm coffee, but lately, those eyes were always shadowed with fatigue and a deep worry. Her dark, curly hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, was escaping in damp wisps around her face. She was small, maybe 5'3", but built solid, like someone who had learned how to stand her ground. Though right now she wasn't standing anywhere, she was crammed onto the closed toilet lid in the small, brightly lit bathroom, the lock barely holding the door shut. Elena was trying to breathe without making a sound. Each breath felt like a scratch in the silence. The man she was hiding from was Mark. He wasn't a stranger. He was the father of her 6-year-old son Noah, and had once been the love of her life. Now he was the source of a crushing fear that had crept into their lives slowly, like a poison. Mark was a big guy, physically strong, the kind who was usually all smiles and jokes in public, but behind closed doors his anger was a scary, unpredictable force. Just 30 minutes ago, everything had shattered. It started over something small, a bill that had been misplaced. It escalated fast, fueled by Mark's frustration and a few too many beers. A push, a stumble, and then a sickening, blinding pain as Elena's left arm slammed hard against the bathroom door frame. She knew immediately it was broken. That sharp, deep agony was now a throbbing reminder of how quickly love can turn into a cage. The one blessing in the whole mess was that Noah was safe. He was at a sleepover at his best friend's house across town, giggling and making blanket forts, completely unaware of the chaos back home. That thought was the only thing keeping Elena grounded. A heavy, furious thump echoed from the bedroom, followed by the sound of something ceramic shattering against the wall. Mark was searching, tearing the place apart in a blind rage. He wasn't yelling anymore, and that was the worst part. When Mark went quiet, he was focused and he was hunting. Elena, despite the pain, had managed to slip away and lock herself in the bathroom. She fumbled for her phone, her good hand trembling so violently it was hard to hold the device still. The screen illuminated her terrified face. She couldn't call the police herself. She couldn't risk him hearing her voice. She needed her mother, who lived far away in a sunny suburb of Jamaica, the only person who would move heaven and earth for her. She found her mother's contact, the screen vibrating slightly under her thumb. No time for pleasantries, no time to explain. She started typing a message that was short, brutal, and terrifyingly clear. Please. He broke my arm. I'm locked in the bathroom. Call the police. Don't call me back. She mashed the send button. The small blue confirmation bubble popped up, and a wave of shaky relief washed over her. It was done. Help was on the way. But then, before her heart could slow down, the phone vibrated again. An incoming text. Her stomach plummeted. Her mother knew the drill. Her mother knew not to reply. The number was unfamiliar. 10 digits, starting with a strange area code she didn't recognize. Not Florida, not Jamaica, not even Toronto. Elena stared at the screen, every muscle seizing up as she read the message. Simply said, "Is he still in the apartment?" The text was like a cold splash of water. It wasn't a wrong number. It wasn't a question about money or a political campaign. This stranger knew everything. They didn't ask who broke her arm or if she was hurt. They asked about him, the abuser, and whether he was still inside the apartment. How did they get her message? Did her phone glitch? Had she typed the number wrong? The chilling thought settled over her. Someone powerful, someone with connections she couldn't even imagine, had intercepted her desperate plea. It felt like being watched by a silent eye, calculating her fear. The heavy, deliberate footsteps of Mark stopped right outside the thin door. He pressed his weight against the wood, testing the lock. "Elena, open the door. Don't be stupid. Mark's voice was low, laced with a dangerous calm. I just want to talk. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. She was trapped between the immediate known monster inches away, and the terrifying unknown presence of the person who had just texted her, the one who knew her deepest secret. She risked a whisper into the phone, her good hand shaking. W. She didn't get to finish the word, who before another text instantly popped up, lighting the screen like a threat. It was a command, not a question. Don't move. Don't make a sound. I am sending emergency services. Delete this conversation. No. The tone was absolute. No fluff, no emojis, just pure chilling authority. The urgency was palpable. Mark was breathing heavily on the other side of the door. Elena didn't know why this stranger wanted the texts deleted, but she didn't question it. Survival instincts took over. She thumbed the screen, deleting the incoming and outgoing texts, wiping the slate clean. The silence lasted for 3 heart-stopping seconds. Then from the street outside came a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't a police siren yet, but the smooth, distinct whoosh of an expensive, powerful engine pulling up sharply outside the building. Mark froze completely. Elena heard him tense up on the other side of the door. Visitors were rare, especially on a cold Thursday night. Hey. Mark's voice was instantly irritable and defensive. Who's out there? The reply was calm, cultured, and carried with an effortless authority. It was a male voice, but not rough like Mark's. It was polished, sounding like it belonged in a boardroom, not on a quiet Toronto street. I apologize for the intrusion. I am looking for a Mr. Mark Johnson. I represent a firm handling a potential and frankly quite urgent legal issue regarding a former employer. It's highly time-sensitive. It was the perfect lie. A subtle, sophisticated maneuver. Mark, perpetually worried about his job and money, fell for it immediately. He stammered, his focus instantly shifting from Elena to the potential professional threat outside. Legal? What firm? Look, I don't know what you're talking about, he grumbled, his heavy footsteps moving away from the bathroom door toward the front door. Elena heard the lock clicking, the chain sliding back, and then the heavy creak as the front door opened, letting in a rush of cold air and muffled, urgent voices. The smooth voice from outside took the lead, pulling Mark out onto the porch with professional ease. Elena slid off the toilet lid, her broken arm hanging uselessly. She had a few precious moments. She didn't head for the front door. She headed for the kitchen window overlooking the alley. She needed to get to Mrs. Petrova, the elderly woman who lived next door and was like a second grandmother to Noah. As she stepped out of the bathroom, her own phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from the correct number, the one labeled Mom US. Toronto police are on the way, sweetheart. Stay put. I love you. Elena sank against the cold kitchen counter, a strangled sob escaping her lips. Tears of pain, fear, and sheer, dizzying relief flooded her eyes. The terror of the powerful stranger who had hacked her life was still there, a chilling shadow, but it was eclipsed by the fact that she was safe. Someone had seen her, reached into the darkness, and pulled her toward the light. When the Toronto police finally arrived, they didn't find the violent chaos Mark had created. They found Elena huddled in the kitchen, her arm clearly broken and wrapped tightly in a dish towel, and a bewildered-looking Mark being detained by a sharp-dressed, imposing man named Mr. Thorne. This Mr. Thorne was politely but firmly insisting that Mark had missed a critical legal hearing concerning a massive tax lien. Mark was confused, angry, and protesting loudly, convinced the suit-wearing man was lying about the whole legal issue. But the police weren't there for the legal talk. They were there for the domestic disturbance call placed from Jamaica and the evidence of Elena's injury. Because Mr. Thorne hadn't technically done anything wrong or violent, the police focused on the obvious crime, the broken arm and the damage inside the apartment. They took Mark away, citing assault and property damage. The whole scene was swift, professional, and almost eerily quiet once Mark was loaded into the back of the cruiser. The sophisticated man who had intercepted Mark was still standing there, watching the police car disappear down the street. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark, custom-tailored coat that looked far too expensive for a local mortgage agent or tax lawyer. He wasn't overly muscular, but he had the coiled, ready energy of someone who was always anticipating the next move. His face was sharp, almost cold, and his eyes, a steely blue, gave away absolutely nothing. Elena watched him from the front step, clutching her chest. The sharp sting of fear was fading. replaced by the confusing need to understand what had just happened. She needed to thank him, to ask him everything. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice husky from fear and exhaustion. "You saved me." Who are you?" The man didn't move. He simply looked at her, and his expression was completely unreadable. "My name is Thorn," he said, his voice the same smooth, calm tone she'd heard outside. "I did what was required." He offered nothing more. No friendly handshake, no business card, no comfort. He just stood there looking like a powerful statue in the winter night. "But the mortgage? And my text?" Elena pressed, desperate for some kind of explanation. "How did you know?" "You texted me back right away." "That is irrelevant now," Thorne stated flatly, dismissing the lie he'd just told the police. He glanced down the street where the flashing red and blue police lights had already faded. "He is gone. You are safe. You must now follow my instructions carefully." His words weren't a request. They were an order delivered with the absolute authority of a man used to being obeyed instantly. Elena suddenly felt a renewed chill, colder than the Canadian air. This wasn't a good Samaritan looking for praise. This was someone who had orchestrated a surgical extraction, and she was now part of his script. Thorne pulled out a simple black flip phone, the kind no one used anymore, and looked at it, not texting, just confirming something to himself. "Your mother has been notified," he continued, speaking as if reading from a checklist. "Your son Noah is secure and will remain with his friend. You must go to the emergency room for your arm now. A town car will be here in 5 minutes. Do not talk to anyone about the specifics of tonight. You were attacked, your mother called the police, and a kind neighbor intervened. That is all. Do not mention me, do not mention the initial text message, and do not use your personal phone until further notice." He walked over to a planter box by the front door and, with a subtle, quick movement, reached down and removed a small, circular device. A tiny listening device, Elena realized with a jolt of horror. He must have placed it there before he confronted Mark, ensuring he controlled every piece of the conversation. "Mark may have placed other devices inside the apartment," Thorne said, still looking at the bug. "You will not return here tonight. Everything you need for the hospital is in the small black duffel bag by the kitchen window." Elena was stunned. She hadn't packed anything. She hadn't had the time. Yet a bag was already waiting for her. "How?" she started, feeling completely out of her depth. "Efficiency," Thorne cut her off. "He was doing all the thinking, all the moving, all the planning." He put the small device into his coat pocket. "The police will contact you later. Be truthful about Mark but vague about the rest. They will recommend a shelter or a relative. Do not go there. The driver will take you to an alternate address." Just as he finished speaking, a sleek, black sedan, the kind that blended into the high-end traffic downtown, pulled up silently to the curb. It wasn't marked as a taxi or an Uber. It was just a black car. "Go. Now," Thorne commanded, pointing to the car. "The driver knows where to go. You will be safe there. Use the flip phone on the passenger seat only for emergencies and only to contact this number." He rattled off a 7-digit number that Elena knew she wouldn't remember in her panicked state. Thorne seemed to sense her confusion. He pulled a thick, folded piece of paper from his inner coat pocket and placed it gently in the pocket of her coat. "It is written down. Everything you need to know for the next 12 hours is on that paper. Memorize it, then destroy it." Elena looked at him, her eyes pleading for a single warm human moment. She needed to know the motive behind this immense effort. "Why are you doing this?" Thorne met her gaze, and for the first time his steely composure wavered slightly, revealing something cold and deeply unsettling beneath. "You texted a secure number that belongs to a security firm I own," he stated simply. "You sent a signal to a server that is only used for high-level extraction and asset protection. By doing so, you activated a response protocol that cost me a great deal of time and resources. You're safe now, Elena. But that safety has a cost." The words hung in the air. That safety has a cost. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a rescue by chance. It was a transaction with a professional, possibly illegal organization. She had accidentally alerted a high-powered entity and now she owed them. Her freedom had a price tag she couldn't afford. The terror of Mark was instantly replaced by the terrifying realization of her accidental debt to this silent, powerful man. "I don't have any money," she whispered, trembling. Thorne gave her the closest thing to a comforting look he was capable of, which was still just a grimacing tightening of his lips. "We know. Go." He opened the car door for her, a final, definitive action that ended the discussion. Elena stumbled toward the sedan. The driver, a woman with tight, neatly braided hair and sunglasses despite the dark night, gave Elena a brief, neutral nod. Elena slid onto the plush leather seat. As the car pulled away, silent and swift, Elena looked back at the apartment. Thorne was gone. It was as if he'd been a phantom, leaving behind only the cold silence of the street and the broken pieces of her former life. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper. It was thick and heavy like premium stationery. She unfolded it and read the first line. Address: 14 Bayside Terrace, North York. You are Mrs. Eva Thompson. You are recovering from a bad flu. You will not leave the premises until instructed. Call the included number for medical assistance only. Elena realized that she hadn't just been rescued. She had been given a completely new fake identity and an entire set of rules to follow. She wasn't safe, she was sequestered. The heavy knot in her chest eased slightly with the knowledge of safety, but tightened again with the terrifying realization of her new, controlled existence. The black sedan didn't take Elena to a standard hospital. It drove her straight to a specialized private clinic tucked away in an unremarkable office building in North York, far from the bustle of the city center. The nurses and doctors there were quiet, efficient, and never asked any difficult questions. They simply fixed her broken arm, setting it in a cast that was surprisingly lightweight and gave her strong painkillers. Everyone treated her with a cold, professional respect, like she was a valuable, fragile object. When she was released just before dawn, the same silent driver took her to the address Thorne had provided, 14 Bayside Terrace. This wasn't an apartment building, it was a cluster of high-end townhouses, set back from the main road. The one Elena was taken to was beautiful, modern, and utterly sterile. It felt more like a model home than a place where a single mother and her son should live. The furniture was sleek, the kitchen gleamed with stainless steel, and there wasn't a single personal touch anywhere. But the moment Elena stepped inside, she didn't feel safe, she felt watched. The first sign was the security panel by the door. It wasn't a simple keypad, it looked like something from a movie, a touch screen linked to multiple cameras. Then there were the windows. Thick, high-impact glass, beautiful but completely unforgiving. And everywhere, embedded subtly into the walls and ceilings, were the tiny, dark lenses of security cameras. It was protection, yes, but it felt exactly like a cage. Elena was no longer alone, though. Noah had been brought to her, whisked away from his friend's house in the dead of night. Noah, 6 years old and sturdy for his age, with his mother's dark, worried eyes, ran straight into Elena's good arm, burying his face in her coat. "Mommy, where are we? I want my own toys," Noah whimpered, clinging tightly. "It's a vacation, sweetie," Elena whispered, running a hand over Noah's hair, trying to sound cheerful. "We're staying here until Mommy's arm is better. It's safe." But even as she said the word safe, it felt hollow. A few hours later, the man himself, Thorne, appeared. He didn't knock, he used a coded access card to let himself in. He was still wearing the same expensive suit, looking like he hadn't slept, but radiating the same unshakable control. "Mrs. Thompson," he greeted her using her new fake name. "I trust your medical care was satisfactory." "It was perfect, thank you," Elena said stiffly, holding Noah closer. She needed to know his name, his real name. "Mr. Thorne, I need to know who I am talking to. What is your name truly?" Thorne paused, his steel-blue eyes examining her for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was worth the truth. "The name is Victor Hale," he finally stated, his voice low and firm. "I am the owner of the firm you contacted. And now, I am responsible for your protection." Victor Hale. The name sounded powerful, cold, and immensely wealthy. "Victor, this isn't protection," Elena said, gesturing around the controlled environment. "This is confinement. We are being watched. There are cameras everywhere." Victor didn't deny it. He walked over to the kitchen island and tapped the counter, where a single glossy pamphlet lay next to a brand new flip phone. "This is a high-level containment zone," he explained, completely unfazed. "It is not a shelter. The police and child services may be looking for you, and so is Mark. Mark has a network of people who owe him favors. We need to disappear you completely until the legal process is underway." The cameras are for your safety. They ensure that if anyone, including Mark's associates, approaches this property, we know about it immediately. He picked up the pamphlet. This outlines the house rules and your daily schedule. You will be assigned a tutor for Noah to continue his schooling here. Your meals will be delivered at specific times. You will not attempt to contact anyone, particularly your mother, on your personal device. You will only use this provided device to call the one number I have given you. Elena's stomach twisted. A schedule? You're telling me what time to eat and when my son is tutored. It eliminates variables, Victor said, his tone utterly clinical. Variables are vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities lead to exposure. Exposure leads to danger. He looked at Noah, who was hiding his face against Elena's side. Your primary concern is your son's security and your physical recovery. My primary concern is maintaining the integrity of this operation. You will abide by the rules. Elena felt a suffocating pressure. Mark had controlled her life with violence and threats. Victor Hale was controlling it with cameras, rules, and a chilling logic that left no room for humanity. It was control, pure and simple. And what happens when the legal process is over? Elena challenged him, her voice trembling slightly but holding steady. When Mark is locked up. What is the cost of my safety, Victor? What do you want? Victor Hale finally gave her his full attention. He stepped closer, and for the first time, Elena saw not just the cold professional, but a man driven by a severe, focused intensity. What I want, Mrs. Thompson, Elena, is not yet clear, he admitted, his voice dropping low. What is clear is that you did not stumble into my life by accident. Elena frowned. What are you talking about? I misdialed my mother's number. Victor shook his head slowly. Your mother's old cell phone number was recently ported to a secure server. My secure server, as part of a long-term asset retrieval operation. I didn't steal a random number. I acquired a very specific line. Your text, Elena, was the exact signal I needed. He paused, letting the heavy implication settle between them. Elena's mind raced. Her mother's old number? A secure server? An asset retrieval operation? What asset? She demanded. Victor didn't answer directly. He walked over to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured, empty street. You mentioned you purchased your Vancouver apartment years ago with inheritance money, he said, turning back to her. That inheritance came from your father, yes? The late Dr. Paul Ward. Elena felt a profound shock. Her father had passed away 5 years ago. He was a low-key, brilliant engineering professor at UBC. No one ever talked about him. Yes. Why? Victor tapped the windowpane lightly. Your father was more than just a professor, Elena. He was a scientist who stumbled onto something immensely valuable. Something that certain global entities want very badly. He was killed for it. And when he died, he put his failsafe, his final piece of protection, on a single encrypted drive, linked to a single secure line. He looked directly at the flip phone on the counter. The line you texted. When that line received a distress signal, it activated me. You, Elena, are not the debt. You are the key. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Her rescue wasn't a mistake. It was the result of a meticulously planned long-game trap set by her own father. She was now connected to a dangerous legacy she knew nothing about. She was the one who accidentally triggered the alarm, announcing her existence to the world, and to Victor Hale. Victor looked at her, his expression softening slightly, a rare flicker of something like concern crossing his face. You and Noah are safe here, Elena. But this cage is necessary. Because if I didn't find you first, the people who killed your father would have. Life in the Bayside Terrace townhouse settled into a strange, unsettling rhythm. Every day was governed by Victor Hale's strict schedule. Noah, 6 years old and sturdy, quickly took to his private tutor. A cheerful, patient woman who arrived and left exactly on time, never asking Elena a single personal question. Elena focused on recovering, spending hours practicing bending her wrist inside the cast, all while the tiny camera lenses watched her every move. The realization that her father, the quiet engineering professor, had actually been connected to a global asset and had been murdered for it, kept her mind constantly churning. She had asked Victor about it, but his answers were always cryptic, focused only on the absolute need for continued secrecy. Then the focus of the cage shifted, from Elena to Noah. It happened 3 days after their arrival. Victor appeared, unannounced as usual, but this time the steely composure he normally wore was fractured by a subtle, deep tension. He walked straight to the clean, modern dining table where Elena was reviewing Noah's simple math homework. "Elena, I need to talk to you about Noah," Victor said, dispensing with his usual professional greeting. Elena's heart immediately clenched. "What about him? Is he okay? Did someone see him?" "He is fine. Physically, he is secure," Victor assured her, though his eyes looked troubled. He pulled a thick, official-looking file from a briefcase. "When you were admitted to the clinic, a standard intake procedure was performed on both you and Noah. We have his basic medical records." Elena frowned. "I already gave them his pediatrician's information. Why would you need new records?" "Standard procedure for high-level containment." Victor dismissed the question, then focused on the paper in his hands. "Noah was born here in Toronto. You listed Mark Johnson as the father." "Correct." "Yes, Mark is Noah's father," Elena confirmed, defensive now. "What does that have to do with anything?" Victor slid a section of the file across the table. It was a dense page of genetic sequencing results, overwhelming to Elena's untrained eye, but one section was circled in sharp red ink. "During the testing, a highly unusual genetic marker was flagged," Victor explained, his voice low and serious. "It's a specific marker linked to a rare hereditary blood disease, one that, thankfully, he does not actively suffer from but carries the gene for." Elena shook her head, confused. "I don't understand. No one in my family has ever had a disease like that." "Precisely," Victor confirmed. "The marker is only found in one specific, extremely rare genetic line. A line that is directly connected to someone I knew well, someone from my past." He paused, letting Elena grasp the implications. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a connection woven into the very DNA of her son. "Who?" Elena pressed, leaning forward, suddenly frantic. "Who is it, Victor?" Victor took a deep, measured breath, the action itself speaking volumes about the difficulty of the answer. "The man tied to this marker. His name was Jacob Voss. He was not Mark Johnson. He was a brilliant but incredibly volatile man. He was briefly my closest partner years ago before everything fell apart." Elena stared at the genetic report, then back at Victor, feeling a wave of nausea. "Jacob Voss? But Mark is Noah's father. We were together when Noah was conceived." Victor's gaze was intense, unwavering. "Mark Johnson cannot be Noah's father, Elena. The genetic line does not match his. The records show the presence of the Voss marker." Elena pushed herself back from the table, reeling. This was impossible. This wasn't just rewriting her last few months. This was rewriting the last 6 years of her life. "You're telling me Mark isn't his father? Then who is?" "I don't know any Jacob Voss." "You may not have known him by that name," Victor said softly, placing his hand over the report. "But you were involved with him. It's the only explanation. Think, Elena. Before Mark. Before you settled in Toronto. Did you ever meet a man, brief though it may have been, who was intense, perhaps working in science or high-level finance? Someone who might have used an alias?" Elena closed her eyes, forcing herself to rummage through the fragmented memories of her late 20s, the years after her father died, the years she spent trying to get her life together. There were brief, blurry encounters. A summer spent working in a cafe near a university campus. A short, passionate relationship with a man who claimed to be an independent software consultant, who was always traveling and never gave her a straight answer about his life. She'd met him right before she met Mark. The memory was vague, buried under years of motherhood and stress. It was the man. "I knew him as Alex," she whispered, the name tasting foreign and bitter on her tongue. "He was only around for a few weeks. He was secretive. Said he traveled constantly for work. He disappeared the same week I found out I was pregnant. I never saw him again." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Describe him." Elena described the man, tall, focused, with intense dark eyes and a mind that seemed to work 10 steps ahead of everyone else. As she spoke, Victor nodded slowly. "That was Jacob Voss. Or one of his aliases," Victor confirmed grimly. "He was brilliant, unstable, and deeply entwined with the organization that killed your father. He was a key operator in their efforts to retrieve the asset. And it appears, Elena, he fathered your son, Noah." Elena felt faint. The simple domestic abuse narrative was gone. It had been replaced by a sprawling conspiracy woven around her, involving her father's death, a dangerous security firm, and now the genetic makeup of her son. My whole life, Elena whispered, looking around the sterile, guarded room. The move to Toronto, meeting Mark. Was that all part of it? Did Mark know? Was he supposed to keep me close, to keep Noah within reach of someone? Victor didn't answer right away. He looked weary, the look of a man carrying too many secrets. I can't confirm if Mark was aware of your connection to Voss or your father's asset, he said. But I can confirm this. Your life was compromised. The fact that you settled here, the fact that you raised Noah, a child with the specific genetic marker they need, it all points to a larger design. Someone has been monitoring you, keeping you close to a known hub of our operations. They didn't care about Mark's abuse. They just cared about the proximity. Victor pointed to Noah's medical report again. The men who killed your father were searching for the asset. If the encrypted drive is biologically keyed, meaning it can only be activated by a unique biological signature, the person they are looking for may not be the key holder but the biological key. They were looking for the child of Jacob Voss, or the child of Dr. Ward, or perhaps both. Noah's genetics put him right in the middle of their target zone. Elena rushed over to the door where Noah was happily playing quietly with his tutor, the camera silently watching them both. Her protection wasn't a cage, it was a necessary bunker. She hadn't just misdialed her mother's number, she had activated a countdown. The revelation that Mark was not Noah's father, and that Noah's true father was a dangerous high-level operative named Jacob Voss, had thrown Elena's world into a chaotic spiral. The simple fear of domestic violence was completely gone, replaced by a complex, global dread. But Victor Hale wasn't finished shattering her past. The next morning Victor returned unannounced as usual, but this time bringing not a file of medical data, but a small, secured electronic tablet. Noah was occupied with his tutor in the next room, giving Elena and Victor a false sense of privacy. Elena, we have finished sweeping your apartment, Victor began, his voice devoid of emotion, like he was delivering a mundane report. We found several bugs, mostly cheap audio recorders. But we also found something more relevant to Mark's immediate role. He placed the tablet on the table and slid it toward her. The screen displayed a series of digital images. They looked like bank transfers and encrypted messages, confusing at first but with a horrifying pattern. This is an accounting of transfers made to Mark Johnson's various offshore accounts over the past 4 years, Victor explained. The money came from a shell corporation tied directly to the organization that employed Jacob Voss, the same one that targeted your father. Elena squinted at the screen. The amounts weren't huge, not enough for him to live lavishly, but they were steady. A regular payment, always wired on the 15th of every month, almost like a salary. What is this? Elena whispered, her throat suddenly dry. He was working for them? Not a traditional employee, Victor clarified. Mark was a custodian. He was being paid to keep you and Noah exactly where you were. His instructions were simple. Keep you isolated, keep you compliant, and ensure you did not move or make any external contacts. Elena felt a searing heat of anger and shame rush over her. She thought back to the past 4 years. Mark was never interested in her personal life or her few friends. He was always subtly discouraging her from visiting her mother in Jamaica or her old friends in the UK. He would subtly sabotage her social plans, not with dramatic arguments, but with small, constant needs and complaints that chipped away at her desire to leave the house. That isolation wasn't a byproduct of his possessiveness. It was his job. He was isolating me, yes, Elena managed to say, her voice shaking with disbelief. But the abuse, the violence, that wasn't just containment. He broke my arm. Victor leaned back, his eyes steady on her face. That is the most difficult part, Elena. His instructions were to contain you, not to harm you. The goal was to keep you available and compliant, not injured or in the hospital, which risks exposure. Violence was counterproductive to his mission. He then displayed another image on the tablet, a communication log heavily encrypted, but deciphered by Victor's team. It was a recent message exchange between Mark and an unknown handler. The handler's message was a stark warning: maintain asset integrity. No physical harm. You are exposing the target. Mark's reply was short and crude: I needed to put her in her place. It's handled. She won't talk. Elena stared at the words, her breath hitching in her chest. He wasn't meant to break your arm, Victor stated, his voice quiet. The abuse, the sudden volatility, that was Mark being Mark. The containment strategy failed because his personal demons overruled his professional contract. He was paid to keep you safe and silent, but he couldn't control his temper. Your broken arm was an accident of his rage, and it was the thing that finally broke their perfect containment strategy. The truth was worse than the lie. Elena had endured 4 years of fear and humiliation, believing she was a victim of a flawed, angry man. Now she knew she was just a prisoner locked away by a paid guard. Her suffering, her shattered sense of self-worth, it had all been calculated, a strategy to keep the key, Noah, within reach of the people who would stop at nothing to retrieve her father's asset. Tears sprang to Elena's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of scorching, self-directed anger. So he wasn't just a terrible man, she choked out. He was a traitor. He was getting paid to terrorize me, to keep Noah quiet, to make sure we didn't escape. Yes, Victor confirmed simply. And the moment the abuse escalated to a point that threatened the operation, that's when they cut him off. Your phone message wasn't just intercepted by me, Elena. It was allowed to be sent because Mark's usefulness was over. His failure was your broken arm. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her escape wasn't a clever maneuver. It was the result of Mark's incompetence. She wasn't rescued by fate. She was dumped by a criminal syndicate who no longer needed their containment agent. She remembered the fear, the constant walking on eggshells, the gaslighting, the small cuts and bruises she used to hide under long sleeves. She had always wondered why Mark, who was so lazy about everything else, was so vigilant about her schedule and her cell phone. Now she knew, he wasn't a jealous partner, he was a gatekeeper guarding his paycheck. Elena closed the tablet, pushing it away as if it were contaminated. The shattering truth was that they, Elena and her son, were never meant to escape the house, the city, or the silent reach of the organization. They were meant to be held in that state of mild, ongoing terror, compliant and isolated, until the organization was ready to collect the asset, which was Noah. They didn't just want my father's drive, Elena whispered, looking toward the room where Noah was happily learning with his tutor. They want my son. And Mark helped them set the trap. Victor nodded, his expression softening with a hint of sympathy. It is a heavy truth, Elena. But knowing this changes everything. You are no longer reacting to domestic violence. You are fighting global espionage. And that is a fight we can win because we are now the ones controlling the variables. He stood up, walking toward the window to look out at the gray Toronto skyline. The lie behind the broken arm was that you were a victim of a personal relationship, Victor concluded. The truth is, you were a strategic holding cell. But now you are a player in the game. That is why this cage is here. We are turning their containment strategy against them. The truth about Mark, that he was just a hired jailer, had scorched away Elena's fear, replacing it with a hard, protective core of determination. She spent the next week dissecting Victor Hale's carefully crafted rules, not to break them, but to understand the logic behind her cage. She knew every inch of the townhouse, every schedule variation and every routine of the people Victor sent. She was no longer a victim. She was a student of high-stakes security. But Victor Hale's control, which Elena was starting to grudgingly respect, was about to be proven vulnerable. It was a cold, bright afternoon. Noah was supposed to be doing his math lesson with his tutor, Mrs. Kim, in the living room. Elena was resting her arm, trying to read the local news on the secured tablet Victor had provided, which only allowed access to vetted, filtered content. Suddenly, the secured tablet flashed bright red. A sound Elena had never heard before, a low, persistent electronic whine, emanated from the hidden speaker in the wall. Victor's containment system was alerting them to a threat. Before Elena could fully react, the door burst open. It wasn't Victor or his silent driver. It was a different man, stocky, wearing heavy work boots and a thick, inexpensive leather jacket, clearly not Victor's usual style. He moved fast, his eyes scanning the room, his movements less refined than Victor's people but far more brutal. "Where is the boy?" the man barked, his voice rough, carrying a heavy Eastern European accent. He wasn't subtle, he was here for a smash and grab. Elena instinctively shoved the tablet under a cushion. Mrs. Kim, the tutor, gasped and pulled Noah behind her chair, clutching him tightly. We don't know what you're talking about, Elena said, pushing herself between the intruder and Noah, her broken arm forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. She might be small, but the rage in her eyes was massive. The man didn't waste time. He moved past Mrs. Kim and grabbed Noah by the arm, hoisting the terrified 6-year-old up. Noah let out a shrill, piercing scream. "The acid is coming with us," the man growled. "You come too or we cut your throat." Just as the man started dragging Noah toward the door, another sound exploded through the house. The rapid, controlled footsteps of professional security. Victor Hale's people had arrived. The next few minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. The intruder was immediately tackled by 2 men in dark tactical gear who were clearly Victor's operatives. They didn't use guns. They used precision and force, subduing the man in seconds. The whole event was terrifyingly fast, lasting less than 2 minutes. The heavy-set man was dragged out, silenced and quickly removed in an unmarked van that sped away. Mrs. Kim was crying, clutching Noah, who was shaking violently but unharmed. Then Victor Hale appeared. He wasn't dressed in a suit. He was wearing dark trousers and a heavy high-tech jacket, his face set in a mask of cold fury. He looked at the scuff marks on the floor and the shaking tutor, then directly at Elena. "The perimeter was breached," Victor stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They knew the location. And they targeted Noah directly." Elena walked over to Victor, the fear now completely eclipsed by pure, protective indignation. "Who was that?" she demanded, her voice rising. "That was not Mark's people. They weren't looking for me, they were looking for my son. This is a war, Victor, and he is the prize." Victor pinched the bridge of his nose, a rare sign of stress. "That was the Corval Group. They are a rival syndicate, aggressive, organized, and focused on controlling the same global operations your father's asset relates to. They believe that Noah, the child of Jacob Voss, is the biological key that can unlock the asset, giving them leverage over the entire technology." The truth was a hammer blow. Her child was not just an accident of fate. He was a target in a criminal conflict far larger than Victor himself. "So they know he's Voss's son?" Elena asked, leaning closer, forcing Victor to look at her. "Yes. And they know he's here. Which means my security, my cage, is compromised," Victor admitted, the admission tasting like ash in his mouth. "I can move you again, but it will be harder now." Elena shook her head slowly. She had spent the past week being passive, following the rules, simply existing under Victor's protection. That was over. Running blindly was just delaying the inevitable capture. He had to learn how this game was played. "No more running," Elena declared, her hazel eyes blazing with a fierce maternal light. "I am done being moved like a chess piece. You told me my father created this asset. You told me Noah is the key. Then you need to tell me everything else." She gestured around the luxurious but confining room. "This cage is only safe until they find the next one. The Corval Group found us here because they knew where to look and they were willing to risk violence. Moving us again just increases the risk. I am not going anywhere until you explain everything. The asset, Jacob Voss, and the rules of the world that is hunting my son." She took a decisive step, narrowing the space between them. "I need to know how to stop being an asset and start being a threat. If I am going to defend him," she looked over at Noah, now whimpering quietly into his tutor's shoulder, "I need to stop being passive. I need to know the strategy." Victor Hale, the man who answered only in commands, looked at the exhausted single mother with a broken arm and saw a sudden, terrifying shift. The panic was gone. In its place was a sharp, focused demand for control. She had just survived a violent home invasion and was not asking for a blanket or a therapist. She was asking for the schematics of the war. Victor watched her for a long moment, the low electronic whine of the alert fading into the background. He realized that in his effort to protect his asset, he had accidentally trained his key player. Victor Hale was a man of logic, and Elena's sudden shift from passive prisoner to active participant was a variable he couldn't ignore. The breach by the Corval Group had proven his current containment strategy was flawed. He knew he couldn't simply move her again. She wouldn't allow it, and the risk of exposure was too great. So Victor agreed to talk. Over the next 3 days, sitting in the sterile living room, Victor began dismantling the carefully constructed walls around Elena's past. He spoke in clipped, professional terms about her father, Dr. Paul Ward, revealing him to be a quiet genius who had created a self-replicating encryption algorithm the asset that could revolutionize global security and finance. Your father knew this algorithm would turn him into a target, Victor explained, sketching diagrams on a whiteboard that Noah usually used for drawing spaceships. He built a kill switch, an emergency distress beacon keyed to his personal life, to ensure that if he ever went silent, someone he trusted would be alerted. Elena, gripping her newly acquired notebook, felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. And that beacon was my mother's phone number. Victor nodded grimly. Specifically, an old prepaid line your mother used for emergencies, the number you had saved in your phone. But your father didn't trust that line to remain secure. Before he died, he tasked a small independent group with rerouting that number. Rerouting? Yes. About 8 months ago, Victor explained, standing up and walking toward the windows, his silhouette stark against the light. The moment your father's initial protector went silent, a warning signal was sent out. We stepped in and digitally ported that exact phone number to a secure, private server owned by my firm. Elena stared at the flip phone Victor had given her, then at her old personal phone that sat silent in a secure box. The truth began to crystallize, shattering the last illusion of coincidence. My personal phone saved my mother's number as a specific contact, Elena said slowly, piecing the fragments together. I only had to type and press send. The message I sent, "He broke my arm," was delivered to the number. But because you had rerouted it, it never reached my mother's actual device. Exactly, Victor confirmed. It didn't go to her in Jamaica. It went to a dedicated alert station within my firm. The system saw a distress text, a life-threatening keyword, come from a verified source linked to the ward asset. Elena felt dizzy, the ground shifting beneath her. The wrong number wasn't a mistake. It was a perfect, silent, calculated trigger. Her father, foreseeing the need for ultimate protection, had installed an emergency panic button using the one number he knew she would instinctively turn to in desperation. So when I sent that text, I wasn't just texting my mom, Elena continued, a chilling realization dawning on her. I was pulling a fire alarm that my father had installed years ago. I was signaling Victor Hale. You were, Victor acknowledged, his voice almost respectful. That system wasn't designed for a domestic dispute, but it did its job. It pulled you out of Mark's containment before the Corval group could capitalize on Mark's failure. But wait, Elena said, pointing a finger at him. How did you know Mark was outside the door? You texted me back asking, is he still in the apartment? You acted like you were watching me in real time. Victor hesitated. It was the first time he had looked genuinely uncomfortable since their meeting. We had Mark under surveillance for weeks, Victor finally admitted. Not because of you. Because of Jacob Voss. We suspected Voss was using Mark or someone in his immediate circle to monitor the asset. When your distress signal came through, we immediately focused our surveillance assets on your apartment. We knew Mark was outside and we knew the situation was critical. We had a car and an operative, Mr. Thorne, ready to move him within 3 minutes. The cold precision was staggering. Her entire life had been a series of carefully placed dominoes, all waiting for her to push the first one. She and Noah were never meant to escape Mark. They were meant to be retrieved by Victor when the original containment broke. My entire life has been a setup, Elena whispered, the weight of the conspiracy finally settling over her. The marriage, the abuse, the location, all of it designed to keep Noah within reach, either for the people who hired Mark or for you. Victor looked directly at her, his usual mask of cold efficiency cracking slightly. I didn't design the cage, Elena. I merely responded to the alarm your father set. But yes, you were never meant to run. You were meant to be safe until the true threats were neutralized. Elena closed her notebook, slamming it shut with a surprising finality. The shame of her victimhood was now completely gone, replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of the battlefield. She wasn't just reacting to external threats anymore. She was dealing with the legacy of her father's brilliance, Jacob Voss's betrayal, and Victor Hale's absolute control. I understand the system now, Victor, Elena said, standing up and meeting his gaze. My father wanted me safe and he knew how to get my attention. You just happened to be the one who answered the call. But now I know how the emergency line works. It's a tool. And tools can be used by anyone who knows the sequence. She smiled, a small, cold, dangerous smile that had never crossed her face before. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized she held the key to her own prison. The moment Elena understood the system, the emergency line, the asset, the biological key, she stopped viewing Victor Hale as her protector and started viewing him as her most powerful and most predictable resource. He was a creature of absolute control and efficiency. His goal was to secure the asset, the drive, and protect the key, Noah. Elena realized the only way out of the cage was not through force, but through manipulation, turning Victor's meticulous war into a self-destruct mechanism for his enemies. Elena's immediate goal was to force a controlled confrontation between Victor's firm and the rival Corval group, using herself and Noah as bait but on her terms. "Victor, we need to move," Elena announced one morning, interrupting his satellite data review. She was no longer asking, she was dictating. Victor looked up, annoyed. "The Bayside Terrace location is compromised. My team is preparing a new long-term site in the Rockies. We move tonight." "No," Elena said firmly, walking over and placing her hand flat on the diagram of the new remote location. "That's exactly what they expect. The Corval group is waiting for a mass exodus. We need to go somewhere they can monitor but you can control." Victor raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her sudden strategic command. "Suggest a target." "The old dockyard warehouse in Mississauga," Elena replied, referencing a location she had seen on Victor's filtered newsfeed, an abandoned site recently flagged for private industrial acquisition. She knew it was a key staging area for Victor's less-than-legal operations. It's high-traffic, known territory, easy to infiltrate and easy to secure in a tight radius. The Corval group will assume we are moving the asset there before transferring it overseas. They will move in immediately. Victor scoffed. "That's a trap for amateurs, Elena. You're exposing the boy." "No, I am setting the trap," Elena corrected, her voice low and steady. "I am the one the Corval group's spy will report to. They are still watching me, monitoring my movement, not just the systems. They found us here because they knew my face. We make a spectacle of moving Noah. A highly visible theatrical transfer. Let them watch the sedan leave and head straight to the docks." Victor stared at her, assessing the risk. He saw the cold logic in her plan. If they ran to a remote location, the enemy could pick them off quietly. If they went to a visible, known choke point, the enemy would rush the target, creating a violent clash that Victor could pre-plan and win decisively. "You want a collision," Victor stated, finally grasping her ruthless intent. "I want them to destroy each other," Elena confirmed. "And I want Mark's handler exposed." For the next 48 hours, Elena became Victor's chief strategist. She directed the staging, insisting that the transfer be done at midnight, ensuring maximum darkness and paranoia. She convinced Victor to use a convoy of 3 identical vehicles, all heavily guarded, knowing the Corval group would have to split their attack, weakening their force. Most importantly, Elena planted a subtle, final piece of bait. During a carefully recorded and allowed phone call with a contact she claimed was an old friend, she casually mentioned retrieving some boxes from the old storage unit Mark used to use. Victor, monitoring the call, noted the detail and dismissed it as domestic chatter. But the eavesdropper from the Corval group would recognize the address as a known drop point for Mark's handler. The night of the move arrived. The black sedans moved through Toronto like shadows. Elena sat in the middle car with Noah, who was heavily sedated under Victor's strict orders, sleeping soundly in the seat next to her. As they approached the dilapidated Mississauga docks, the area was plunged into chaos. The Corval group, acting exactly as Elena predicted, struck the convoy instantly. Gunfire erupted, but Victor's armored cars and professional security detail held the perimeter. It was brutal, quick, and exactly what Victor had planned for. But while Victor's teams were neutralizing the Corval hit squad, Elena had orchestrated her true maneuver. She had convinced Victor to let her keep the old, provided flip phone, arguing it was a psychological comfort. Just before the convoy pulled out, she sent a single encrypted location tag message to the flip phone number's old, abandoned server address, the one she knew Mark's former handler still used for communication, thinking it was secure. The message read, "Mark's ledger found in storage unit 14. Code 749. The second the convoy pulled up, a separate vehicle, unmarked and unassociated with Victor Hale, screeched into the dockyard from the opposite side. It was a single man, clearly desperate, his focus not on the firefight, but on getting into the storage unit Elena had mentioned. Victor watched the chaos unfold. His men won the firefight easily. The Corval group was decimated, their intelligence gathering, and their assumption that Noah would be defenseless, proving fatal. Then Victor noticed the lone man trying to force open a nearby padlocked storage door. Victor recognized the man, a low-level financial courier for the organization that had employed Mark. The man was risking a massive firefight over a simple storage unit, proving that whatever was inside was more important than the fight for Noah. "Secure that unit," Victor commanded, his eyes narrowing. When his team pried open the storage unit, they didn't find the asset. They found a small, cheap safe containing Mark's private digital ledger, proof of every payment, every order, and the name of Mark's direct contact, the financial courier they had just captured, proving a deep-seated betrayal within the wider organization. Elena had not only used the Corval group to force a battle, she had used the battle to expose Mark's handler, whom Victor had never been able to trace. Victor looked back at Elena, who was calmly covering the sleeping Noah with a blanket. Her broken arm was resting in her lap, but her expression was one of absolute, terrifying victory. "You knew exactly what you were doing," Victor said, his voice flat with astonished realization. "I gave you exactly what you wanted, Victor. The neutralization of your primary rival and the capture of the man who organized my containment," Elena said, meeting his gaze without blinking. "But I also forced you to expose the one thing you didn't want me to know, the extent of your own security breaches." Victor realized he had lost control of the narrative. Elena had gone from being the key to the drive to becoming the master key of the entire operation. Months later, the frigid concrete of Toronto was a distant memory. Elena and Noah lived in a small, stucco house nestled on a hill overlooking the Pacific, far from the reach of syndicates and spies. Their new identities were solid, professionally fabricated by Victor Hale's firm as the final, massive cost of her safety. They were Elena and Adam Scott now, residents of a quiet coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, living an ordinary, wonderfully boring life. The violent collision at the docks had been decisive. Victor's firm, having eliminated the Corval group and exposed Mark's handler, emerged as the dominant, if somewhat shaken, power. Victor fulfilled his final obligation to Elena, securing her permanent disappearance. He ensured Mark remained locked away, his confession of paid containment and abuse ensuring a long sentence. He liquidated Elena's Vancouver assets, providing her with enough capital to start over, insisting it was payment for the successful resolution of the asset retrieval operation. Victor didn't simply let her go. He designed her new life with the same meticulous efficiency he used to run his global operations. He chose the location for its isolation, its robust local government records hard to penetrate, and its distance from all known operational hubs. Elena, now Adam's mother, spent her days doing normal things, volunteering at Noah's new school, navigating the local grocery store and patiently rebuilding the shattered pieces of Noah's childhood. Noah, free from the constant tension and abuse, was flourishing, his innate curiosity returning. The only sign of their past life was the faint scar on Elena's wrist, a permanent reminder of the violence and the betrayal. The only piece of technology Elena possessed that wasn't locally purchased and carefully vetted was the one she demanded from Victor. The knowledge of how her father's asset was finally secured. Victor had explained that the asset, the self-replicating algorithm, was too dangerous to release. Instead of using Noah, the biological key, to unlock it, Victor had used the chaos of the collision to launch a sophisticated cyber weapon. The algorithm, which existed only as code on an encrypted drive, was targeted by Victor's countercode. The result wasn't retrieval but complete, irreversible digital annihilation. The asset was gone, wiped from all known servers and backups, ensuring that neither Victor nor the remnants of the Corval group, nor the other global entities her father feared, could ever possess it. Noah's existence, the biological key tied to Jacob Voss, no longer mattered to the criminal underworld because the lock itself no longer existed. Life was quiet, safe, and entirely free of surveillance. Months passed without incident, solidifying the peace. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, as Elena was waiting in the school pickup line, her new standard-issue smartphone, a device she used only for PTA emails and weather alerts, vibrated. It was a text message. The number was untraceable. Not a local area code, not an international number, but a series of randomized digits that vanished the second the message was opened, leaving no trace in the call log. It was a phantom, sent via a deep-layer satellite bounce only a few organizations in the world could access. Elena's heart pounded, a sudden brutal return to the fear she thought she had buried. She pulled the car over, her hands shaking as she opened the text. It contained only 2 sentences. "You did what I couldn't. He's safe now." Elena stared at the cryptic message. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a demand. It sounded like an acknowledgement or perhaps a confession. Elena thought of her father, Dr. Paul Ward. He was the one who designed the emergency trigger, the one who risked everything to create a failsafe. He knew the asset was too dangerous to fall into anyone's hands, even Victor's. Then the final, chilling possibility settled over her. She thought of Jacob Voss, Noah's brilliant, volatile father, who was supposed to be working for the enemies but had ties to Victor's past. Voss had been working to retrieve the asset but had also ensured his son carried the biological key. Was it possible that Voss had always intended for the asset to be destroyed? That the final, true failsafe wasn't the number that summoned Victor, but the biological connection that forced a final, devastating confrontation? Whoever sent the message, be it a long-lost associate of her father, or perhaps even the ghost of Jacob Voss himself, watching from the shadows, the meaning was clear. The war was truly over. Elena took a deep, shuddering breath, looking up at the gray, rain-swept sky. Her story began with a desperate text message sent in a moment of pure fear. It ended because she had learned how to answer the language of power, leverage the rules of espionage, and use the trigger her father had left behind to finally protect her son. She pressed her thumb firmly on the screen. The message vanished. Then, with the same cold, efficient focus she had learned from Victor Hale, Elena performed a complete factory reset on the phone, wiping every trace of her personal data, her new identity, and the untraceable communication. The old Elena Ward was gone. The new one was untouchable. She put the car in drive, pulled into the school lane, and watched as Noah, laughing and carrying a backpack too big for him, ran toward her. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.